Welcome back. All right, so I want to talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins and the season they had before things got a lot better. And yet, things didn't get a lot better records-wise the season after this one. So we're looking all the way back to 2003, 2004, the last season before the National Hockey League had a salary cap. The Penguins were in serious trouble. Their building needed to be replaced. Mario Lemieux was doing everything he could to prevent this team from being moved. There was a lot of discussions about whether or not this team might get moved, whether or not Pittsburgh was going to support the Penguins. Conversations that had occurred with Pittsburgh before Mario Lemieux being drafted in 1984. And it's interesting because it really is a very similar situation. The Penguins are a failing team on and off the ice. Mario Lemieux joins the team as a player, and things get better. Then things fall off. Lemieux doing his best to stay in the lineup and do everything he can from ownership to on the ice. Anything that he could possibly do, he's doing. But the team is failing, and then they draft Sidney Crosby, and there hasn't been any discussions of the Pittsburgh Penguins as a viable franchise really since. It has been incredible. And of course, they did need the new building. They got the new building. And so things have really stabilized in Pittsburgh. And this is another example of why when people ask me, can this team win a Stanley Cup within the next 5 years? It doesn't matter what team you throw at me. My answer is it's possible. Because this was a team that 5 years after this, only 4 seasons after this, would win the Stanley Cup. So they finished 23, 47, 8, and 4. There were 4 columns because ties were still a thing. Ties were in their last year. 58 points they had overall. And this was Eddie Olczyk's first year as coach. And it was really set up to fail. And he would get off to a slow start the following season before being replaced behind the bench. And he came in after Rick Kehoe had a rough year in 2002, 2003 as the coach. So if you look month by month, things are ugly. 2-4-3 in October. Then they're 3-8-2 in November. 4-8-3 in December. So by the time you reach the end of December, the season's done, right? January, it gets a lot worse. 2-14. February, they were 2-9-1. And then the record gets better before the season's done. They were 8-4-3 in March, and they were 2-0 in April. So things do get better, right? They do win their share of games down the stretch. They end up winning 23 games, even though through their first 62 games, they'd won 11. So they won 12 of their last 20 games to get to those 23 wins. So as rough as the record is, it could have been a lot worse without that good run. They ended up finishing 1 point behind the Chicago Blackhawks. The Chicago Blackhawks also in a rebuild at this point. So Chicago and Pittsburgh both rebuilding, and this is why when people talk about rebuilds, they will mention Chicago and Pittsburgh often, but notice they're both at the bottom of the standings. They're both going to win Stanley Cups not long after this, right? Pittsburgh, as I said, in 09. 2010, it's going to be Chicago's turn. Power play that year for Pittsburgh was actually all right, 18.06%. The league average was 16.46% that year. Their penalty kill, a bit of a problem, 77.24% versus a league average of 83.54%. That league average penalty kill much, much better than the season we just had, where I think the league's power play averaged to more than 20%. So they scored 190 goals, which is 22nd out of 30 teams. So their attack wasn't awful, even though they only had one 20-goal scorer. They had 303 goals against, which was worst in the National Hockey League. And this was a team that, once they got off to that slow start, I mean, I can't say that they were trying to finish at the bottom and maybe get themselves this guy Ovechkin, but, I mean, anyways, I can't prove they didn't either. So the leading scorer that year was Dick Tarnstrom. In 80 games, he had 16 goals, 36 assists for 52 points. And yeah, that was incredible. He actually had a really good year that year. Then you have Morozov was the number 2 scorer in 75 games. He had 16 goals, 34 assists, 50 points. Then you had Ryan Malone, the one 20-goal scorer. 81 games, 22 goals, 21 assists, 43 points. Milan Kraft would have hit 20 goals if he played every game. In 66 games, he had 19 goals, 21 assists, 40 points. Rico Fata, in 73 games, had 16 goals, 18 assists, 34 points. One of the saddest things is that Mata and Fata never played together that I know of. So, because, deep down, I'm 12. Mario Lemieux did play 10 games that year, 1 goal, 8 assists, 9 points. And again, at this stage in Mario's career, he needs somebody to help him get dressed to get on the ice, because of various ailments he's dealing with at this point in time in his career. But when he plays, he's still about a point per game guy. So the goaltending, what I thought was interesting was this. Caron, 924-5 with an 883 save percentage. Aubin, 7-9, 908 save percentage. I thought it was really highly suspect that year that Aubin only had 16 games on his in terms of his record. Yeah, he was pretty good. So if you want to finish at or near the bottom of the standings, you're probably not playing Caron. Marc-Andre Fleury, who had been the number one pick the previous year, gets thrown to the Wolves, finishes 4-14-2 with an 896 save percentage. Considering his save percentage is better than Caron, that's not too bad. But again, notice that Aubin's win-loss record is better than the others. And Kyoto, the Kyoto Dragon, 3-4-1 with an 892 save percentage. Brochu would get into a game. He didn't end up with a record, but he had a 947 save percentage. So Brochu, very successful with Pittsburgh, just not much in terms of sample size. So this is when they're fully into the rebuild. And they need to have those star players to draw the fans in and say, hey, we're doing this rebuild right. So the 2003 draft, they draft first, they draft Fleury. And as I said in the redraft, I still think that's the right pick for the Pittsburgh Penguins. It sets them up. 2004, they draft second, they draft Malkin. So they don't get Ovechkin, but they get Malkin. Now, in the event that they had gotten Ovechkin and Malkin ends up in Washington, who knows how things would have been different. Would Ovechkin have more goals? Would he have less goals? Would Ovechkin and Crosby have had natural chemistry? Would they not have? So again, it's fun to debate. We'll never know the answer. But yeah, Goligoski, they drafted 61st overall, and Tyler Kennedy, who played some games in the National Hockey Leagues, drafted 99th overall. 2005, and this is where the controversy really showed up. So we didn't have a season in 04-05. So they had this randomized draw. And it was weighted in favor of teams that had been poor. I think it was the previous 3 seasons they weighted in there, where teams that had had poor returns would have better odds of drafting early. Well, since Pittsburgh had been bad for a while, they get that number 1 draft pick. So they'd had Malkin in 2004. There is no 04-05 season. And in 2005, they draft Crosby first overall. And in that same draft, they pick Letang at 62nd. So you have Fleury, Malkin, Crosby, Letang, all drafted over those 3 drafts. And in 2006, again drafting second overall, because the 05-06 season was not really better than the 03-04 season, they get Jordan Staal. So that's how you do it right there. Center, center, center. So it's funny because looking at drafts now, and I talk about, oh, I think this guy could go here, and people are like, well, they already have a center. Yeah, Pittsburgh, center, center, center. It doesn't matter. You need that depth down the middle, and it worked. Having drafted all those centers absolutely worked. Now, what's interesting, too, is that they lost 18 in a row that season from January 13th until February 22nd for a record of 0-17-1. Absolutely obliterates their overall record, but they were 8-1-1 from March 6th to March 23rd. So as bad as this record is overall, it really is that 18-game stretch that drives it home that this team isn't going to be anywhere near the playoffs. If they'd been relatively decent during that period, we very likely aren't talking about them getting Malkin second. We may very well not be talking about them getting Crosby first because they might have been further ahead in the standings. It might have interfered with where they're weighted in the randomized draft of 05, and maybe they draft third or fourth instead of first, and Sid the Kid goes somewhere else, right? So that's where things would have gotten interesting. But it's all wild speculation. And why not do wild speculation? 2008, of course, they would be finalists. In 2009, they'd win the Cup. But there wasn't a lot to indicate that was going to happen in 05-06. They finished 22-46-14. So the record's no better than it is in 03-04 coming out of the lockout. But they have Crosby and Malkin in the lineup in 05-06. And in 06-07, the turnaround happens. 47-24-11. So while we expected Pittsburgh to get better, the fact that they almost double their points total from the previous season is absolutely ludicrous. And from then on, they're a playoff team. They're a contender. They're one of the best teams in the National Hockey League. And it's just like that. And again, when teams are coming out of rebuilds or retools, making that prediction of when that big jump's going to take place could be huge. This year, we're looking at a team like Detroit, a team like Ottawa, Maybe a team like Buffalo. Maybe one of these teams is going to be the next one to make that big jump. And before that big jump happens, nobody believes in it. Nobody believes it's going to happen. After that first year, people were saying, hey, so I had Crosby and Malkin, this team still sucks. But 06, 07, things got a lot better. Now, 03, 04 was the third year in a row they finished dead last in their division. So this was not a case of, just tanking so they could get Malkin or Ovechkin, and tanking because Crosby's the next year. This was a team that financially was having its struggles, and they had a lot of problems. And really, I thought it stemmed back to the Jaromir Jagr trade and them not getting enough back in that. So even though they had some regular season success afterwards, I felt like that was one that really was a black eye on the team for a while. Now, in terms of attendance, their average attendance that year, 03-04, was 11,877. Not a lot of local excitement about the Pittsburgh Penguins, and that's at Mellon Arena. And they would stay in Mellon Arena until 2010. The arena that's now called PPG Paints Arena is the one that replaces it and definitely helps to stabilize the franchise in Pittsburgh. So again, as I talk about, teams getting moved and who's rumored and all this, Pittsburgh was a very popular target in the mid-'80s and again in the mid-2000s as to whether or not they might be a team that gets moved, and they didn't. And it turned out that the NHL was right on this one. Absolutely got it 100% right. The Pittsburgh Penguins are a very strong franchise now. The one question people may have is, hey, it's almost 20 years later. When are we going to see the Pittsburgh Penguins start to drop as Crosby, Malkin, Letang are getting older? And how do they deal with that? And can they find another big name? This year's draft coming up, of course, you have Connor Bedard. Bedard has all of these generational tags attached to his name. Would Pittsburgh, if they got off to a slow start this season, say, you know what? Wouldn't mind getting Bedard. Crosby's not going to play forever. Malkin's not going to play forever. Maybe we wouldn't mind getting Bedard. And what would the internet's reaction be? Well, it'd be a bad one. In the event that Pittsburgh fell out of the playoffs, and again, I'm just saying this here, in the event they did, and they ended up winning the draft lottery and getting that number one pick, hockey fans would be quite upset. Outside of Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh fans would be happy. You might have some fans that would be happy for Pittsburgh, but after having Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr, and now having Crosby and Malkin, if they then got Bedard, maybe flirted with getting another really solid young player in the draft, that would definitely cause some consternation among hockey fans. But there you go. They've been in the playoff mix for a very long time. Of course, they won the Cup in 2009, won it again in 2016 and 2017. And so the question's out there as to whether or not they can win a fourth with this core. But this is kind of where it all gets set up. The 03-04 season, that was a disaster, minus March and April that fixed this record a little bit. But without that disastrous season, there's no Malkin, probably no Crosby, and may not have been a Jordan Staal either in 06. We'll never know. But hey, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.